In Alpine Valley, Oregon, an exhausted veterinary technician was about to uncover devastating family betrayal. What started as coming home from work turned shocking when she found her rescue dog collapsing. Elisse Brook wasn't your typical 28-year-old. For 3 years, she dedicated her life to healing animals while supporting her cancer-stricken mother. When she encountered Scout vomiting blood, she had no idea she was uncovering systematic poisoning by her sister. Elise's rescue led to investigation. What began as emergency became destruction. Community would never be same after learning family betrayal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elise's key scraped against the lock twice before finding its mark. 18 hours at the clinic, and her hands still trembled from the emergency surgery that had run 4 hours over schedule. The golden retriever had made it, but exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like lead. "Scout?" she called, dropping her scrubs in the hallway basket. The house felt wrong, too quiet. Usually, her key brought the thunder of paws across hardwood, followed by Scout's enthusiastic whining and tail thumping against the wall. Today, nothing. She found him in the living room, curled by the window where afternoon sunlight usually warmed his dark fur. But Scout wasn't basking. He lay motionless, breathing shallow and labored. When she knelt beside him, his usually bright eyes looked glassy, unfocused. "Hey, boy." Her voice carried the gentle tone she used with frightened animals. "What's going on?" Scout lifted his head with obvious effort, his tail managing only the weakest flutter. Elise's veterinary training kicked in, checking his gums, feeling for his pulse, noting the tremor in his limbs. His gums showed the pale pink that made her stomach clench. She helped him to his feet, but Scout's legs buckled after 2 steps. This wasn't lazy reluctance. This was something else entirely. The first wave of vomit came without warning, violent heaving that brought up yellow bile streaked with fresh blood. "Oh, God, Scout!" Her hands moved automatically, checking his temperature. 103.2 degrees. His pulse was rapid, thready. When she pressed gently on his abdomen, he whimpered, a sound that cut through her professional composure. Scout had never been sick, not once in the 3 years since she'd rescued him from the shelter, where he'd arrived half-starved and scarred. He'd been her greatest success story, proof that love and patience could heal even the deepest wounds. Another heave. More blood this time, bright red against the hardwood. Elise's phone was in her hand before she realized she'd reached for it. Amanda's number, programmed for emergencies. "Liz, what's wrong?" Her sister's voice carried that familiar note of distraction. "It's Scout. He's really sick. Did you notice anything weird when you were house-sitting? Did he get into anything?" A pause. Too long. No, I don't think so. He seemed fine yesterday when I left." "What kind of sick?" "Vomiting blood, high fever. He can barely stand." "Oh my God, that's really bad, isn't it?" Something in Amanda's tone struck her as odd. Not the shock she'd expected, but something else. Something that sounded almost like guilt. "Amanda, think carefully. Did you give him anything? Any treats that weren't his usual food?" "No, nothing like that. I followed your list exactly. You know I would never—" Scout retched again. This time the blood was unmistakable, dark, clotted. Elise's training screamed internal bleeding, possible poisoning, immediate intervention required. "I have to go. I'm taking him to the hospital." "Wait, do you need me to—" Elise hung up before Amanda could finish. Scout's breathing had become more labored in just those few minutes. She wrapped him in a soft blanket, surprised by how light he felt. When had he lost weight? How had she missed the signs? The drive to Alpine Valley Animal Hospital felt both eternal and instantaneous. Scout lay still in the passenger seat, his head resting on her thigh while she drove one-handed, stroking his fur and murmuring reassurances she didn't believe. "It's okay, baby. Dr. Hayes is going to take care of you." Scout's tail didn't even twitch. The emergency entrance hummed with its usual late evening energy. Elisse burst through the doors with Scout's blanket-wrapped form in her arms, and the night staff recognized the panic in her face. "Dr. Hayes!" she called out, not caring about protocol. "I need Dr. Hayes." Michael Hayes emerged from examination room 3, his graying hair disheveled. When he saw Scout's condition, his expression shifted into focused intensity. "Exam room 1, now." "I can handle this," she protested as he moved to take Scout. "I know his medical history better than anyone." Dr. Hayes was already lifting Scout, his experienced touch immediately assessing what her panic had missed. "Elisse, you're too close to this, you know that." She wanted to argue, but the tremor in Scout's breathing stopped her words. This was her dog, her rescued boy, her proof that broken things could be made whole. But emotion clouded judgment, and Scout needed clear thinking. "Vitals first," Dr. Hayes said, settling Scout on the examination table. "Then blood work, imaging if necessary. When did symptoms start?" "About 20 minutes ago. He was fine this morning when I left." Dr. Hayes' hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking Scout's gums, listening to his heart, palpating his abdomen. His frown deepened with each assessment. "This presentation is concerning, the neurological symptoms especially." "Neurological symptoms?"
Watch his eyes. Dr. Hayes moved his fingers across Scout's field of vision. Scout's gaze was sluggish, unfocused. Delayed response, combined with the GI bleeding and hyperthermia. He didn't finish, but Elisse understood. The constellation of symptoms pointed to something serious, something that didn't happen by accident. "I'm going to need comprehensive blood work, full tox screen." Tox screen? The words felt foreign. "You think he was poisoned?" Dr. Hayes' expression remained carefully neutral. "I think we need to rule out all possibilities. This could be anything from ingesting something toxic to intentional poisoning." The words hung between them like a physical weight. Someone had hurt Scout deliberately. "That's impossible," Elisse whispered. "Who would—" Amanda was watching him, but she loved Scout. She would never— But even as she said it, something cold settled in her stomach. Amanda's strange pause on the phone, the way her voice had sounded almost like she'd already known. "Let's focus on treating him first," Dr. Hayes said gently. "The blood work will take a few hours. I want to stay with him. Elisse," his voice carried firm kindness, "let me do my job. Scout needs me to be thorough." She looked down at Scout, who lay still as death on the examination table. 3 years ago, she'd chosen him from a cage full of unwanted animals because something in his eyes had called to her. The same wariness, the same careful hope she recognized in her own mirror. They'd healed each other. Now someone had tried to take that away. "How long for results?" "A few hours. I'll come find you the moment I know anything." Elisse pressed a gentle kiss to Scout's forehead. "Fight, okay? Just keep fighting." As she walked toward the waiting room, her phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Is he okay? Do you need me to come?" For the first time in her life, Elisse wasn't sure she wanted her sister anywhere near her. Elisse stared at Amanda's text until the words blurred together. "Is he okay? Do you need me to come?" The concern seemed genuine, but something about the phrasing felt rehearsed, like Amanda had been composing the message before sending it. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "Waiting for test results. Will call when I know more." The family waiting room at Alpine Valley Animal Hospital had been designed for comfort. Soft lighting, cushioned chairs, and calming blues and greens. A coffee station that someone kept perpetually stocked. Elisse had sat in these chairs with countless pet owners over the years, offering tissues and gentle words while they waited for news about their beloved animals. She'd never imagined how suffocating the room could feel when you were the one waiting. The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m. Scout had been in Dr. Hayes' care for 3 hours, though it felt like 3 days. Every time footsteps approached in the hallway, Elise's heart raced, hoping for news. Each time they passed by, disappointment settled deeper in her chest. She'd called her mother twice, getting voicemail both times. Patricia was probably asleep. The cancer treatments left her exhausted, and she'd learned to treasure any rest she could get. Elisse had left a message asking her to call back, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. No point in worrying Mom until she knew what they were dealing with. Her phone buzzed again. Amanda. I can't stop thinking about Scout.
This is so scary. Are you sure there's nothing I could have done differently? There it was again, that strange undertone. Not the natural worry of someone who loved Scout, but something more complicated. Something that sounded like someone trying to convince themselves as much as her. Elisse set the phone aside without responding. She couldn't process Amanda's anxiety right now, not when her own threatened to overwhelm her completely. The memory of finding Scout kept playing on repeat, his glassy eyes, the way his legs had buckled, that first horrible moment when she'd seen blood in his vomit. In 3 years, Scout had never been anything but healthy and vibrant. His worst injury had been a scraped paw from an enthusiastic chase after a squirrel. This sudden, severe illness didn't fit any pattern she understood. Elisse? Dr. Hayes stood in the doorway, still wearing his surgical scrubs. His expression was carefully neutral, the face he wore when delivering difficult news to families. Elisse had seen that look countless times, but never directed at her. How is he? She stood up too quickly, the room spinning slightly from hours of stress and no food. Scout is stable for now. We've got him on IV fluids and anti-nausea medication. Dr. Hayes gestured to the chair beside her. Can we sit? I need to go over the test results with you. The careful way he spoke made her stomach drop. In veterinary medicine, when doctors ask you to sit down, the news was never good. Just tell me, she said, remaining standing. Whatever it is, just tell me. Dr. Hayes pulled out a tablet scrolling to Scout's lab results. The blood work confirms what I suspected. Scout has been poisoned with ethylene glycol, antifreeze. The words hit her like a physical blow. Antifreeze? But how could he... Where would he even get access to? That's what concerns me most. Dr. Hayes' voice was gentle but firm. The levels in his system indicate systematic exposure over a period of time. This wasn't a single incident where he got into a container. Someone has been giving him small doses over the past 2 to 3 weeks. Elise's legs gave out and she sank into the chair. Small doses?
I mean, this was deliberate? Planned? Someone has been slowly poisoning Scout? The room seemed to tilt sideways. Deliberate. Planned. Someone had been methodically trying to kill her dog, the animal who trusted everyone and everything because she'd taught him that the world could be safe. Who had access to Scout's food? Dr. Hayes asked quietly. Who's been in your house recently? Elise's mind raced through the possibilities. Me, obviously. My mother comes by sometimes, but she's been too sick for regular visits. Amanda house sits when I work long shifts. She's been staying over about 3 times a week for the past month. Even saying the words felt like a betrayal. Amanda had been the one to help her choose Scout at the shelter. She'd been there for his first vet visit, had celebrated his adoption anniversary every year. Amanda loved Scout almost as much as Elisse did. Almost. Anyone else? Neighbors with a key? Dog walker? No, I don't use a walking service. Scout only goes out with me or Amanda. The neighbors don't have keys. Elise's voice sounded hollow in her own ears. It has to be someone else. Someone who broke in or... But even as she said it, she knew how ridiculous it sounded. Who would break into someone's house repeatedly just to poison their dog? And Scout would have been upset by strangers. He was friendly but protective. He would have barked, would have shown signs of stress if unknown people had been in the house. Dr. Hayes was watching her carefully, his expression sympathetic but uncompromising. I've been doing this for 15 years, Elisse. I've seen a lot of poisoning cases. The pattern here, the systematic dosing, the lack of other signs of break-in or disturbance, this almost always points to someone with regular, trusted access. You're talking about Amanda. The words came out as barely a whisper. I'm talking about following the evidence. I know this is difficult. She wouldn't. Elise stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked over the parking lot. Amanda loves Scout. She helps me with his vet bills when money's tight. She takes him to the dog park when I'm working doubles. She would never hurt him. But even as she defended her sister, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed began clicking into place. Amanda's recent mood swings, the way she'd been avoiding eye contact during their last few conversations, her strange questions about Scout's insurance policy a few weeks ago, questions Elise had dismissed as idle curiosity. "I need to ask you about your pet insurance," Dr. Hayes said gently. "Scout is covered for accidental death and illness, correct?" Elise turned from the window, her mouth dry. "Yes, it's a comprehensive policy."
I got it when I adopted him because I wanted to make sure I could always afford his care, no matter what happened.
What's the coverage amount?
$50,000.
The number hung in the air between them. It had seemed reasonable when she'd signed up, enough to cover any emergency, any treatment Scout might need. Now it sounded like a motive. Has anyone in your family been having financial difficulties lately? The question was asked with clinical detachment, but it hit like an accusation. Elise thought about Amanda's recent complaints about grad school expenses, her vague mentions of needing to pick up extra work. Amanda had borrowed money from her twice in the past month. Small amounts, $100 here and there, always with promises to pay it back quickly.
I need to call her.
Elise said suddenly.
I need to ask her directly.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Hayes nodded.
That might be wise, but Elise,
He paused, choosing his words carefully.
given the seriousness of what we're dealing with here, you should consider contacting the police. This is a criminal matter.
Police. Criminal matter. The words felt surreal, like they belonged to someone else's life. Elisse Brook, who rescued animals and worked overtime to pay for her mother's cancer treatments, didn't have criminal matters in her life. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she scrolled to Amanda's number. 3 missed calls from her sister in the past hour, each one making the knot in Elise's stomach tighten further. Amanda answered on the first ring.
Liz, thank God. How's Scout? What did the vet say? Amanda,
Elise's voice came out steadier than she felt.
I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth.
Of course. Anything.
Scout was poisoned with antifreeze. Over the past few weeks, someone has been systematically giving him small doses.
Silence on the other end of the line. Long enough that Elise wondered if the call had dropped. Amanda? Are you there?
That's horrible. Amanda's voice sounded strange, constricted. Who would do such a thing? That's what I'm trying to figure out. You're the only person besides me who's had regular access to Scout. I need to know, did you notice anything strange? Anyone hanging around the house? Any signs that someone might have been inside when they shouldn't have been?
Another pause, shorter this time, but still noticeable.
No, nothing like that. The house was always exactly how you left it.
What about Scout's food? Did you ever give him anything different? Treats from someone else? Maybe something a neighbor offered? I would never give him anything without checking with you first. You know that. But there was something in Amanda's voice, a defensive edge that hadn't been there before. The Amanda that Elise knew would have been asking a dozen questions. How much antifreeze? How did they figure it out? What's the treatment? Instead, she seemed focused on defending herself from accusations that Elise hadn't even made yet. Amanda, is there anything you need to tell me? Anything at all? I don't know what you're implying. Now Amanda sounded angry, which was somehow worse than the defensiveness. Are you seriously asking if I poisoned Scout? Your own sister? I'm not asking anything. I'm just trying to understand. Well, I can't help you understand because I didn't do anything wrong. I love Scout. I would never hurt him. The fact that you would even suggest... The line went dead. Amanda had hung up on her. Elisse stared at her phone, her hands trembling. In 28 years of being sisters, Amanda had never hung up on her. Not during their worst fights as teenagers, not when they'd argued about their father's funeral arrangements, not when money was tight and tensions ran high. Dr. Hayes was watching her with knowing eyes. How did that go? She's defensive, angry that I would even ask. Elisse sank back into the chair, feeling older than her 28 years. But that doesn't mean anything. Anyone would be defensive if their sister accused them of poisoning a dog. Maybe. Dr. Hayes' tone suggested he thought otherwise. Elisse, I have to tell you something else. We pulled the security footage from the clinic's parking lot. It covers part of your street. There's no evidence of anyone unusual approaching your house in the past few weeks. No delivery trucks, no service vehicles, no strangers. Another piece of evidence pointing towards someone with legitimate access. Someone Scout trusted. Someone Elisse trusted. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, we focus on Scout's treatment. The good news is that we caught this relatively early. If he hadn't gotten another dose tonight, if you hadn't brought him in when you did, Dr. Hayes let the implication hang in the air. He's going to need intensive care for the next few days, but his prognosis is good. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by a new wave of anger. Someone almost killed Scout, had planned to kill him slowly and painfully over the course of weeks. And the police? Dr. Hayes handed her a business card. Detective Carmen Rodriguez specializes in cases like this. I've worked with her before. She's good at handling family situations with sensitivity. Family situations. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Not a random act of cruelty, but something that had grown out of the relationships and trust that should have been Scout's greatest protection. Elisse looked at the card, Detective Rodriguez's name printed in simple black letters. Making this call would change everything. There would be no going back to the easy assumption that family meant safety, that love was always enough to prevent terrible things from happening. But Scout was alive because she'd brought him in tonight. Scout was alive because she'd trusted her instincts that something was wrong. Maybe it was time to trust those instincts about everything else, too. "Can I see him before I go?" she asked. Of course. He's sedated, but he's stable. Dr. Hayes led her to the intensive care unit, where Scout lay connected to IV lines and monitoring equipment. His breathing was steady, his color better than it had been hours earlier. Someone had tucked a soft blanket around him, and his favorite toy, a battered tennis ball, sat on the table beside his kennel. "Sleep well, baby," Elisse whispered, touching her fingers to the kennel door. "I'm going to find out who did this to you. I promise." As she walked back to her car, Detective Rodriguez's business card felt like a weight in her pocket. The weight of truth, of decisions that couldn't be undone, of love that might not be enough to survive what came next. The drive home from the animal hospital passed in a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. Elise's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, Detective Rodriguez's business card burning like an accusation in her jacket pocket. Every turn brought her closer to a decision that would shatter whatever remained of her family's fragile peace. At 2:47 a.m., her house felt like a crime scene. She moved through familiar rooms with new eyes, seeing potential evidence everywhere. Scout's food bowl, recently washed and sitting in the dish rack, the spare key Amanda used, hanging innocently on its hook by the back door, the comfortable chaos of a life lived in trust, now feeling naive and dangerous. Sleep was impossible. Elisse made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, staring at the card until Detective Rodriguez's name was burned into her memory. At 8:15 a.m., she dialed the number. "Rodriguez." "Detective, this is Elisse Brook. Dr. Hayes at Alpine Valley Animal Hospital gave me your card. My dog was poisoned, and he thinks someone I know did it deliberately." A pause. Professional assessment in the silence. "I can be there in an hour. Don't touch anything your dog might have eaten from, and don't discuss this with anyone else until we talk." Don't discuss this with anyone else. Which meant not calling Amanda back, despite the 7 missed calls and increasingly frantic text messages that had accumulated overnight. Detective Rodriguez arrived exactly 60 minutes later. A compact woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She moved through Elise's house with methodical efficiency,
photographing Scout's feeding area, taking samples of his remaining food, bagging his water bowl as evidence. "Tell me about your sister's access to the house," she said, settling into the living room where Scout usually greeted visitors with enthusiastic tail wagging. "Amanda has a key. She house sits when I work long shifts, about 3 times a week for the past month. She feeds Scout, lets him out, sometimes stays overnight if I'm working a double." Detective Rodriguez made notes in a small leather notebook. Any recent changes in her behavior? Financial stress? Personal problems? The questions forced Elisse to examine patterns she'd been unconsciously ignoring. She's been different lately, more withdrawn. She borrowed money from me twice last month, which is unusual, but she seemed more desperate about paying it back quickly.
How much money?
$150 the first time, $200 the second. She said it was for textbooks and lab fees. Elisse hesitated, but now that I think about it, she was vague about the details. Usually she's very specific about what she needs money for. "What else have you noticed?" The detective's calm presence made it easier to voice suspicions that felt like betrayals. "She's been asking strange questions about Scout's insurance policy. When I got the renewal notice last month, she wanted to know about the coverage amounts, what would happen if something happened to him. I thought she was just making conversation." Detective Rodriguez looked up from her notes. $50,000 is significant coverage for a pet. I wanted to make sure I could always afford his care. Scout came from an abusive situation. I couldn't bear the thought of not being able to help him if something went wrong. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd tried to protect Scout from everything except the person he trusted most. "I need to ask about your family dynamics. Any history of mental health issues, gambling problems, substance abuse?" Elisse thought about their father, dead 5 years now from a heart attack that stress had probably accelerated. "Dad had some problems with gambling when we were kids. Nothing severe, but it caused tension between my parents. Amanda was too young to really understand, but it affected her. She always felt like she had to compete for attention. And now? Now she's struggling in graduate school, mom's medical bills are overwhelming, and I'm working myself to death trying to keep everything together." The words came out harder than she had intended. Amanda's always felt like the problem child. Maybe she thought this would solve something. Her phone buzzed with another text from Amanda. "Elisse, please call me back. I'm worried about you. We need to talk." Detective Rodriguez noticed her glance at the phone. "Has she been trying to contact you?" "All night. Calls, texts. She seems," Elisse searched for the right word, "frantic. May I see the messages?" Scrolling through Amanda's texts felt like reading evidence of guilt rather than concern. The messages showed an escalating panic that seemed disproportionate to normal worry about a sick pet. "I can't sleep thinking about Scout. This is all so sudden. Are you sure the vet is right about the poisoning? Maybe it was an accident. Maybe he got into something at the park. Please don't shut me out. I know you're upset, but we're family." Detective Rodriguez read through them with professional detachment. She's trying to control the narrative, suggesting alternative explanations, emphasizing family loyalty. Classic behavior when someone's involved but trying to deflect suspicion. The clinical assessment hit Elisse like cold water. These weren't the messages of an innocent person offering comfort. These were the messages of someone trying to manage a crisis. What happens next? "I need to interview your sister formally. With your permission, I'd like to ask her to come to the station voluntarily for questioning." Voluntarily, for now. The implication hung between them like a sword. Before Elisse could respond, her phone rang. Amanda's name on the display. "Answer it," Detective Rodriguez said quietly. "Act normally, but don't tell her about me being here." Elise's hands shook as she swiped to accept the call. "Amanda?" "Thank God. I've been so worried. How's Scout this morning?" "He's stable, still in intensive care." Elisse met Detective Rodriguez's eyes, drawing strength from the woman's steady presence. "That's good news, right? I mean, stable is better than... I've been thinking all night about what could have happened. Maybe someone at the vet clinic made a mistake with the test results? False positives happen sometimes. There it was again, the desperate need to find alternative explanations. Amanda, who'd always been quick to accept bad news, who usually catastrophized everything, was suddenly optimistic about Scout's condition and suspicious of medical professionals. The tests were very specific, Amanda. Dr. Hayes is certain Scout was poisoned with antifreeze over several weeks. Silence. Then, several weeks? But that would mean someone was doing it on purpose. Over and over? Yes. That's horrible. Who would... Elisse, you don't think... Amanda's voice cracked. You don't think I had anything to do with this, do you? The question hung in the air, begging for reassurance that Elisse could no longer give. I think someone who had access to Scout did this to him. I think someone who knew about his insurance policy saw an opportunity. You do think it was me. Amanda's voice went flat, emotionless. Your own sister? Detective Rodriguez was nodding, encouraging her to continue. I think I need to know the truth, Amanda.
Whatever it is, the truth is that I love Scout almost as much as you do. The truth is that I would never hurt him, and the truth is that it breaks my heart that you could even think I would. Amanda hung up again, leaving Elisse staring at her phone and wondering when her sister had become someone she didn't recognize. That was good, Detective Rodriguez said. You gave her a chance to tell the truth, and she chose deflection and manipulation instead. We'll bring her in for formal questioning this afternoon. As Detective Rodriguez packed up her evidence kit, Elisse felt the last of her denial crumble. Her sister, the person she'd protected, supported, and loved unconditionally, had tried to kill Scout for insurance money. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound she'd ever imagined possible. At 3:30 p.m., Elisse sat behind one-way glass in the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, watching her sister fidget in interview room B. Amanda had arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in her best jeans and a sweater that made her look younger than 25. She kept checking her phone, smoothing her hair, practicing expressions in the reflection of the metal table. She's preparing, Detective Rodriguez observed quietly, running through her story, getting her face ready. Elisse wanted to defend Amanda's nervous grooming as normal anxiety, but something about her sister's careful preparation felt calculated. This wasn't the Amanda who usually fell apart under pressure, who cried during confrontations and sought comfort in others' arms. Are you sure you want to watch this? Detective Rodriguez asked. It might be easier. I need to see it. Elisse's voice was steadier than she felt. I need to know. Detective Rodriguez entered the interview room with a file folder and 2 cups of coffee. Her demeanor was warm, almost maternal, a deliberate choice that Elisse recognized from watching her work with frightened animals. Amanda, thank you for coming in voluntarily. I know this is difficult. Of course. Anything to help find out who hurt Scout. Amanda accepted the coffee with a grateful smile that looked genuine. I just can't understand who would do such a thing. Let's start with your relationship with Scout. How long have you known him? Since Elisse adopted him 3 years ago. I was actually there when she picked him out at the shelter. Amanda's voice warmed with what seemed like authentic affection. He was so scared, but something about him called to her. She has this gift with damaged things. Damaged things. The phrase hit Elisse like a slap. Was that how Amanda saw herself? And you help care for him regularly. When Elisse works long shifts, yes. She's been pulling doubles almost every week since Mom's cancer treatment started. Someone needs to look after Scout. Detective Rodriguez made notes, her expression neutral. Tell me about the last few weeks. Anything unusual in Scout's behavior, changes in his routine? Amanda's pause was almost imperceptible, but Elisse caught it.
He seemed a little less energetic lately. I thought maybe he was getting older or stressed about Elise being away so much. When did you first notice this change? Maybe 3 weeks ago?
Around the time I started staying over more frequently, the timeline matched Dr. Hayes' assessment perfectly. Elise's stomach clenched as Detective Rodriguez continued her methodical questioning. Amanda, I need to ask about your financial situation. Are you experiencing any stress in that area? For the first time, Amanda's composure cracked slightly. I'm a graduate student. Everyone's broke in grad school. But beyond normal student expenses, any gambling, outstanding debts, pressure from creditors? I don't know what that has to do with Scout being poisoned. The defensiveness was immediate and sharp. Behind the glass, Elise leaned forward. Amanda only got that tone when she was hiding something significant. I'm trying to understand if anyone in Scout's circle might have been desperate enough to see his insurance policy as a solution to financial problems. Insurance policy? Amanda's voice pitched higher. Who told you about that? Your sister mentioned you'd been asking questions about Scout's coverage recently. Amanda's face flushed red. I was just curious. $50,000 seems like a lot for a dog. I wondered if Elise was paying too much in premiums. $50,000 could solve a lot of problems for someone drowning in debt. Are you seriously suggesting I would kill Scout for money? Amanda's voice rose, genuine outrage mixed with panic. He's like family to me. But Detective Rodriguez had touched a nerve. Amanda's hands were shaking as she reached for her coffee and sweat beaded along her hairline despite the cool room. Amanda, our digital forensics team pulled your browser history from the past month. You researched antifreeze poisoning in dogs. You looked up information about pet insurance claim processes. You visited several gambling websites. The color drained from Amanda's face. That doesn't mean anything. You also researched how long it takes for symptoms of antifreeze poisoning to appear, how to make it look accidental. Stop. Amanda's voice cracked. Just stop. We have records of significant gambling losses. Online poker, sports betting. You've lost over $12,000 in the past 6 months. $12,000? Elise felt sick. Where had Amanda gotten $12,000 to lose? Your graduate stipend is $800 a month. Your rent alone is $600. You've been borrowing money from your sister, your mother, even taking cash advances on credit cards. The minimum payments alone are more than you make.
Amanda was crying now, but they weren't tears of grief or shock. They were tears of someone whose carefully constructed lies were collapsing. The pressure must have been enormous, Detective Rodriguez continued gently. Creditors calling, threats of academic suspension for unpaid fees, your mother sick, your sister working herself to death. And there's Scout, insured for more money than you've ever seen. You don't understand, Amanda whispered. You don't know what it's like to watch everyone you love struggle while you're the reason they can't get ahead. So you thought if Scout died accidentally, the insurance money would solve everyone's problems? It wasn't supposed to hurt him for long. I researched the dosage. I thought he'd just get sick enough that we'd have to put him down. Humanely. Peacefully. Elise's world tilted sideways. Amanda had just confessed. Her sister, the person she'd trusted with everything, had systematically poisoned Scout while calculating how to make his death look merciful. But Scout's stronger than you expected, Detective Rodriguez observed. He kept getting better between doses. I had to keep adjusting. Amanda stopped, realizing what she'd admitted. The door to the observation room opened, and Patricia Brook entered, supported by a walker and looking frailer than Elise had seen her even during chemotherapy. Her mother's face was gray with shock. "What is she saying?" Patricia whispered. "What is Amanda saying?" On the other side of the glass, Amanda looked directly at the mirror, as if she could see through it. I never meant for him to suffer. I love Scout. I love all of you. I was just so tired of being the failure, the burden, the one who makes everything harder." Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. "Amanda Brook, you're under arrest for animal cruelty and attempted insurance fraud." As the detective read Amanda her rights, Elisse watched her sister's face cycle through emotions: relief, terror, defiance, and something that might have been gratitude that the pretending was finally over. Patricia Brook gripped her walker with white knuckles. "How did I not see this? How did we not know?" Elisse couldn't answer. She was still staring at Amanda, trying to reconcile the sister who'd helped her choose Scout with the person who'd spent weeks slowly poisoning him while researching the most efficient way to end his life. The betrayal cut so deep she couldn't feel its edges yet. That would come later, along with the guilt and the questions about what she could have done differently. For now, there was only the terrible clarity of truth and the sound of handcuffs clicking closed around her sister's wrists. The handcuffs seemed to break something fundamental in Amanda. She sagged in her chair, the careful composure she'd maintained finally crumbling as Detective Rodriguez finished reading her rights. Through the one-way glass, Elisse watched her sister transform from someone fighting to maintain innocence into someone who looked almost relieved to stop pretending. "I want to tell you everything," Amanda said quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. I can't carry this anymore." Detective Rodriguez sat back down, her expression professionally neutral despite the breakthrough. "You understand you've waived your right to an attorney?" "I understand." Amanda wiped her eyes with her sleeve, leaving mascara streaks on the fabric. "But I need you to understand something first. I never wanted to hurt Scout."
Control it. Make it quick. In the observation room, Patricia Brook made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. Elisse reached for her mother's hand, finding it cold and trembling. "Tell me how it started," Detective Rodriguez said. Amanda stared at the table, gathering herself. "The gambling started small, just online poker during study breaks. I was good at it, actually. Won more than I lost for the first few months." Her voice took on the flat tone of someone reciting a story they'd told themselves too many times. "But then I hit a losing streak. I kept thinking I could win it back if I just played a little longer, bet a little more. When did it become a problem? When I lost my research stipend money. $800 that was supposed to last the month, gone in one night." Amanda's hands twisted in her lap. "I panicked. Borrowed from Elisse, told her it was for textbooks. She gave it to me without question because she trusted me. The past tense hit Elisse like a physical blow. Amanda was already talking about their relationship as something that used to exist. But you didn't stop gambling. I told myself I'd win back what I'd borrowed, pay Elisse back, and quit. Classic gambler logic, right?" Amanda's laugh was bitter. "Instead, I lost everything again. And then I found these higher stakes games online, the kind where you can win serious money if you're smart enough." Detective Rodriguez made notes, her pen scratching against paper in the quiet room. "How much debt did you accumulate?" $18,000. Credit cards, cash advances, money borrowed from loan sharks who found me through the gambling sites." Amanda's voice broke. "They started calling, texting, showing up at the university." Behind the glass, Patricia Brook made another wounded sound. 18,000? "Oh, Amanda, why didn't you come to us? What were you going to do, Mom?" Amanda seemed to be speaking directly to the mirror. "You're fighting cancer. Elisse is working herself to death paying for your treatments. I was supposed to be the one family member who wasn't a burden. So you thought killing Scout would solve your problems." Detective Rodriguez's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Not killing, not at first." Amanda's distinction sounded desperate even to her. "I researched it. Antifreeze poisoning can look like kidney failure if the dose is right. I thought I could make Scout sick enough that putting him down would seem like mercy." The clinical way Amanda discussed Scout's planned death made Elisse feel physically ill.
This wasn't a moment of desperation or panic.
This was premeditation, research, careful planning to end the life of an innocent animal who trusted her completely. Walk me through how you did it. Amanda's composure cracked again. I mixed small amounts into his food when Elisse wasn't home, just a few drops at first, to see how he'd react. When he didn't get sick enough, she stopped, swallowing hard. I increased the dose. How long did this go on? 3 weeks. I thought it would be faster, but Scout's strong. Stronger than the online articles said dogs usually are. There was something almost like admiration in Amanda's voice. He kept bouncing back between doses. I had to keep adjusting the amount. Elisse felt her mother's grip tighten on her hand. Patricia was crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks as she listened to her younger daughter describe systematically torturing her older daughter's beloved pet. What changed last night? Why the larger dose? The loan sharks gave me a deadline. Tomorrow. Amanda's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They said if I didn't have at least $5,000 by Friday, they'd start getting creative about collection methods. They knew where Mom lived, where Elisse worked. The threat to her family seemed to be Amanda's breaking point. She sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. So you gave Scout enough antifreeze to kill him quickly. I thought it would be kinder, fast instead of drawn out, and Elisse would get the insurance money right away instead of paying for expensive treatments that might not work anyway. The twisted logic made Elisse want to scream. Amanda had convinced herself that murdering Scout was an act of kindness, that insurance fraud was really helping the family, that her gambling addiction justified any action necessary to feed it. The insurance policy was $50,000, Detective Rodriguez confirmed, enough to pay off my debts and still give Elisse money for Mom's treatments. Everyone would be better off. Everyone except Scout. Amanda's face crumpled. Scout was never supposed to suffer. I researched the kindest methods. I thought I was being humane. The word humane, coming from Amanda's mouth in this context, made Elisse want to shatter the glass between them. Humane would have been asking for help. Humane would have been admitting she had a problem instead of solving it by killing the most innocent member of their family. Detective Rodriguez closed her notebook. Amanda Brook, you've confessed to animal cruelty in the first degree and attempted insurance fraud. The district attorney will review your statement and determine additional charges. As Amanda was led away in handcuffs, she looked directly at the one-way mirror one last time. Tell Elisse I'm sorry. Tell her I know sorry isn't enough, but I need her to know I never stopped loving Scout. Or her. The door closed, leaving Elisse and Patricia alone in the observation room, with the echo of Amanda's words and the weight of a family destroyed by secrets, desperation, and choices that could never be undone. Patricia Brook collapsed into a chair, her walker clattering to the floor. "How did we get here?" she whispered. "How did I fail both my daughters so completely?" Elisse knelt beside her mother, wrapping her arms around the woman who'd always seemed strong enough to hold their family together. Now, Patricia felt fragile as glass, ready to shatter from the force of truths she'd never imagined possible. "We didn't know," Elisse said, though the words felt hollow. "We couldn't have known." But even as she comforted her mother, part of Elisse wondered if that was really true. Had there been signs she'd missed? Warnings she'd ignored? Had her need to see Amanda as someone who needed protecting blinded her to the person Amanda had actually become? In a hospital across town, Scout was slowly recovering from 3 weeks of systematic poisoning, his body fighting to heal from betrayal he'd never understand. Soon, Elisse would have to decide whether love could survive this kind of destruction and whether forgiveness was possible when trust had been shattered beyond recognition.
The booking process at Multnomah County Jail stripped away the last vestiges of the Amanda that Elisse had known. Through the institutional windows, she watched her sister submit to fingerprinting, photographs, and the orange jumpsuit that transformed her from troubled graduate student into criminal defendant. The woman who emerged from processing looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her confession and the reality of consequences she'd clearly never imagined facing. Patricia Brook refused to leave the jail until visiting hours began the next morning. She sat in the uncomfortable lobby chairs, clutching a tissue box and staring at nothing, occasionally murmuring fragments of prayers or memories. "She used to bring me wildflowers when she was little," she whispered to Elisse at one point. "Dandelions from the yard, like they were roses." The first news van arrived at 6 a.m. Elisse discovered them while driving to check on Stout at the hospital. Channel 8 News. Parked outside the jail, a reporter with perfect hair practicing her soundbite about a shocking case of animal cruelty that has rocked the quiet community of Alpine Valley. By evening, the story had spread to regional outlets. Graduate student accused of poisoning sister's dog for insurance money. The headlines made it sound simple, sensational. They reduced Amanda's complex desperation and Elise's devastating betrayal to clickbait designed for sharing. None of them mentioned Scout's gentle nature, the way he'd learned to trust again after his initial abuse, or how he'd represented healing for an entire family that was now shattered. "We need to talk about bail," said Janet Morrison, the public defender assigned to Amanda's case. She met with the family in a sterile conference room that smelled of industrial cleaning products and broken dreams. "The prosecutor is asking for $50,000, given the premeditated nature of the crime and the insurance fraud component." $50,000? Patricia's voice was hollow. The same amount as Scout's policy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Amanda had tried to steal $50,000 and now needed exactly that amount to avoid sitting in jail while awaiting trial. "We don't have that kind of money," Elisse said quietly. "Even with a bondsman, we'd need $5,000 cash." Janet Morrison nodded with the weary understanding of someone who'd had this conversation countless times. "There are other options. Amanda could remain in custody until trial, or we could argue for reduced bail based on her lack of prior criminal history and family ties to the community." How long would that take? 6 to 8 months, possibly longer. The district attorney's office is treating this seriously. Animal cruelty cases generate significant public attention, especially when insurance fraud is involved. 8 months? Elisse tried to imagine Amanda surviving 8 months in jail while Patricia's cancer treatments continued and Scout slowly healed from his trauma. The family would be destroyed by different means, but just as effectively. "What does Amanda want?" Patricia asked. "She wants to plead guilty and accept whatever sentence the court deems appropriate. She seems to believe that taking responsibility quickly will somehow minimize the damage to your family. But the damage was already done, spreading through their community like ripples in still water. Scout's veterinary text at Alpine Valley couldn't look Elisse in the eye anymore, their previous easy camaraderie replaced by awkward sympathy. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid conversations they didn't know how to navigate. Patricia's cancer support group buzzed with whispered speculation about that woman whose daughter tried to murder a dog. The local newspaper ran an editorial about the case, pontificating about the moral decay that leads people to value money over innocent life. Online comment sections filled with armchair psychologists diagnosing Amanda's character flaws and keyboard warriors calling for maximum sentences. None of them knew Amanda as the child who'd cried when cartoon animals were hurt, or the teenager who'd volunteered at the animal shelter before college applications and academic pressure consumed her life. Meanwhile, Scout's recovery provided the only bright spot in an otherwise devastating week. Dr. Hayes reported steady improvement in his kidney function, though long-term effects remained uncertain. The poisoning had caused permanent damage that would require ongoing monitoring and possible dietary restrictions for the rest of his life. He's a fighter, Dr. Hayes told Elisse during one of her twice-daily visits. His spirit is remarkable. Most dogs who've been through this kind of systematic trauma show behavioral changes: anxiety, depression, loss of trust.
Scout seems to understand that not everyone who hurt him was trying to hurt him. The observation hit closer to home than Dr. Hayes probably intended. Scout's ability to separate Amanda's betrayal from his relationship with Elisse demonstrated a wisdom that she wasn't sure she possessed. Could she love her sister while holding her accountable for nearly killing the most innocent member of their family? Ryan Mitchell, her colleague and increasingly important source of emotional support, found her crying in the supply closet after a particularly difficult day. "My brother made choices that hurt everyone who loved him," he said gently, holding her while she sobbed. "But those choices didn't erase the person he was before addiction changed him. You're allowed to grieve both the betrayal and the loss of who you thought Amanda was." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Amanda would appear before Judge Harrison to enter her plea and hear the formal charges: animal cruelty in the first degree, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison; attempted insurance fraud, another felony with similar penalties; and animal abuse resulting in substantial bodily harm, which could add additional years to any sentence. "The prosecutor wants to make an example," Janet Morrison explained. "Animal rights activists have been pressuring the DA's office to treat these cases more seriously. Amanda's case has all the elements that generate public outrage: premeditation, vulnerable victim, financial motive." Public outrage. Amanda had become a symbol rather than a person, a cautionary tale about moral failure and systemic problems in mental health and addiction treatment. Lost in the sensational coverage was any nuanced discussion of how desperation could drive fundamentally decent people to cross lines they'd never imagined approaching. As Elisse prepared for Amanda's hearing, she struggled with impossible questions about justice, mercy, and family loyalty. Part of her wanted Amanda to face the full consequences of choices that had nearly killed Scout. Another part remembered the sister who'd helped her choose Scout at the shelter, who'd been genuinely excited about adding a dog to their family. The truth was probably that both versions of Amanda were real: the caring sister and the desperate woman who'd prioritized her gambling debts over an innocent animal's life. Understanding that complexity didn't excuse Amanda's actions, but it made the path forward infinitely more complicated than any news story could capture. The booking process at Multnomah County Jail stripped away the last vestiges of the Amanda that Elisse had known. Through the institutional windows, she watched her sister submit to fingerprinting, photographs, and the orange jumpsuit that transformed her from troubled graduate student into criminal defendant. The woman who emerged from processing looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her confession and the reality of consequences she'd clearly never imagined facing. Patricia Brook refused to leave the jail until visiting hours began the next morning. She sat in the uncomfortable lobby chairs, clutching a tissue box and staring at nothing, occasionally murmuring fragments of prayers or memories. "She used to bring me wildflowers when she was little, dandelions from the yard like they were roses," she whispered to Elisse at one point. The first news van arrived at 6 a.m. Elisse discovered them while driving to check on Scout at the hospital. Channel 8 News parked outside the jail, a reporter with perfect hair practicing her soundbite about a shocking case of animal cruelty that has rocked the quiet community of Alpine Valley. By evening, the story had spread to regional outlets: graduate student accused of poisoning sister's dog for insurance money. The headlines made it sound simple, sensational. They reduced Amanda's complex desperation and Elise's devastating betrayal to clickbait designed for sharing. None of them mentioned Scout's gentle nature, the way he'd learned to trust again after his initial abuse, or how he'd represented healing for an entire family that was now shattered. "We need to talk about bail," said Janet Morrison, the public defender assigned to Amanda's case. She met with the family in a sterile conference room that smelled of industrial cleaning products and broken dreams. "The prosecutor is asking for $50,000, given the premeditated nature of the crime and the insurance fraud component." "50,000?" Patricia's voice was hollow. the same amount as Scout's policy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Amanda had tried to steal $50,000 and now needed exactly that amount to avoid sitting in jail while awaiting trial. "We don't have that kind of money," Elisse said quietly. "Even with a bondsman, we'd need $5,000 cash." Janet Morrison nodded with the wary understanding of someone who'd had this conversation countless times. There are other options. Amanda could remain in custody until trial, or we could argue for reduced bail based on her lack of prior criminal history and family ties to the community. How long would that take? 6 to 8 months, possibly longer. The district attorney's office is treating this seriously. Animal cruelty cases generate significant public attention, especially when insurance fraud is involved. 8 months? Elisse tried to imagine Amanda surviving 8 months in jail while Patricia's cancer treatments continued and Scout slowly healed from his trauma. The family would be destroyed by different means, but just as effectively. "What does Amanda want?" Patricia asked. "She wants to plead guilty and accept whatever sentence the court deems appropriate. She seems to believe that taking responsibility quickly will somehow minimize the damage to your family. But the damage was already done, spreading through their community like ripples in still water."
Scout's veterinary techs at Alpine Valley couldn't look Elisse in the eye anymore. Their previous easy camaraderie replaced by awkward sympathy. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid conversations they didn't know how to navigate. Patricia's cancer support group buzzed with whispered speculation about that woman whose daughter tried to murder a dog. The local newspaper ran an editorial about the case, pontificating about the moral decay that leads people to value money over innocent life. Online comment sections filled with armchair psychologists diagnosing Amanda's character flaws, and keyboard warriors calling for maximum sentences. None of them knew Amanda as the child who'd cried when cartoon animals were hurt, or the teenager who'd volunteered at the animal shelter before college applications and academic pressure consumed her life. Meanwhile, Scout's recovery provided the only bright spot in an otherwise devastating week. Dr. Hayes reported steady improvement in his kidney function, though long-term effects remained uncertain. The poisoning had caused permanent damage that would require ongoing monitoring and possible dietary restrictions for the rest of his life. "He's a fighter," Dr. Hayes told Elisse during one of her twice-daily visits. "His spirit is remarkable. Most dogs who've been through this kind of systematic trauma show behavioral changes, anxiety, depression, loss of trust. Scout seems to understand that not everyone who hurt him was trying to hurt him." The observation hit closer to home than Dr. Hayes probably intended. Scout's ability to separate Amanda's betrayal from his relationship with Elisse demonstrated a wisdom that she wasn't sure she possessed. Could she love her sister while holding her accountable for nearly killing the most innocent member of their family? Ryan Mitchell, her colleague and increasingly important source of emotional support, found her crying in the supply closet after a particularly difficult day. "My brother made choices that hurt everyone who loved him," he said gently, holding her while she sobbed. "But those choices didn't erase the person he was before addiction changed him. You're allowed to grieve both the betrayal and the loss of who you thought Amanda was." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Amanda would appear before Judge Harrison to enter her plea and hear the formal charges: animal cruelty in the first degree, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison; attempted insurance fraud, another felony with similar penalties; and animal abuse resulting in substantial bodily harm, which could add additional years to any sentence. "The prosecutor wants to make an example," Janet Morrison explained. "Animal rights activists have been pressuring the DA's office to treat these cases more seriously. Amanda's case has all the elements that generate public outrage: premeditation, vulnerable victim, financial motive." Public outrage. Amanda had become a symbol rather than a person, a cautionary tale about moral failure and systemic problems in mental health and addiction treatment. Lost in the sensational coverage was any nuanced discussion of how desperation could drive fundamentally decent people to cross lines they'd never imagined approaching. As Elisse prepared for Amanda's hearing, she struggled with impossible questions about justice, mercy, and family loyalty. Part of her wanted Amanda to face the full consequences of choices that had nearly killed Scout. Another part remembered the sister who'd helped her choose Scout at the shelter, who'd been genuinely excited about adding a dog to their family. The truth was probably that both versions of Amanda were real. The caring sister and the desperate woman who'd prioritized her gambling debts over an innocent animal's life. Understanding that complexity didn't excuse Amanda's actions, but it made the path forward infinitely more complicated than any news story could capture. Amanda Brook had always been good at math. Even as a child, she could calculate odds, percentages, and probabilities faster than most adults. It was this facility with numbers that first drew her to poker, and ultimately, it was numbers that convinced her that killing Scout was not just justified, but necessary. The descent had been gradual enough that she'd barely noticed it happening. What started as $20 buy-ins during study breaks escalated so slowly that each increase seemed reasonable, logical even. When she won $300 in her first month, Amanda felt like she'd discovered a secret source of income that could supplement her meager graduate stipend without anyone knowing. The beauty of online gambling was its privacy. No judging looks from family members. No questions about where she was spending her evenings. Just her laptop, the soft glow of poker tables, and the intoxicating rush of risk and reward playing out in real-time algorithms. By month 3, Amanda was playing in higher-stakes games, convinced that her psychology background gave her an edge in reading other players' betting patterns. When she lost her first significant amount, $800 that was supposed to last the entire month, she'd felt physically ill. But the logical part of her brain immediately began calculating how to win it back. The mathematics seemed clear. If she'd lost $800 on bad luck, the law of averages suggested her luck was due to turn. All she needed was one good night to recoup her losses and return to smaller, safer games. That one good night never came. Instead, Amanda found herself caught in the classic gambler's fallacy, chasing losses with increasingly disparate bets. When her stipend money ran out, she borrowed from Elisse, manufacturing stories about textbook expenses and lab fees. Elise's immediate, unquestioning generosity had felt like validation that borrowing was temporary, manageable. But each loan became seed money for the next betting session, and each loss dug the hole deeper. She started taking cash advances on credit cards, telling herself that one big win would let her pay everything back before anyone noticed. The interest rates were astronomical, but they seemed irrelevant compared to the potential payouts she was chasing. The threat started in month 4. Her first contact with serious gambling debt came through a text message that seemed almost polite. "Amber, you've missed payments on your accounts. Please contact us to arrange payment." When she ignored it, the messages became more specific. They knew her class schedule, her favorite coffee shop, her mother's address. Amber's psychology training should have recognized the signs of addiction, but she was too deep in the spiral to maintain any objective perspective. Every rational voice in her head was drowned out by the desperate conviction that she could fix everything if she just found the right strategy, placed the right bet, caught the streak that would solve all her problems. It was during one of her house-sitting nights that Amber first noticed Scout's insurance paperwork on Elise's kitchen counter. The policy renewal notice listed coverage amounts that made her stomach drop. $50,000 for accidental death, comprehensive medical coverage, even grief counseling for the owner. $50,000. More money than Amber had ever seen in one place.
Enough to pay off every debt, return every loan, and still have money left over to help with their mother's medical expenses. The idea formed slowly, almost subconsciously. What if Scout got sick? What if some accident happened while he was in her care?
Elisse would be heartbroken, but she'd also be financially secure in a way that could transform all their lives. Amanda spent 3 weeks researching before she acted. She read veterinary journals about accidental poisoning, studied insurance claim procedures, even researched the symptoms and timeline of various toxins. The antifreeze decision was coldly practical, easily available, difficult to detect without specific testing, and capable of mimicking natural kidney failure if administered properly. Her first attempt was tentative, just a few drops mixed into Scout's evening meal while Elisse worked a double shift. Amanda told herself she was testing whether Scout would even eat food that had been tampered with. When he showed no immediate reaction, she convinced herself that maybe the dosage had been too small to cause harm. The twisted logic that followed horrified her, even as she constructed it. Scout was getting older anyway. Elisse worked such long hours that he was often lonely and understimulated. Wouldn't it be kinder to let him go peacefully while he was still happy, rather than watch him suffer through the inevitable decline of age and neglect? Each subsequent dose became easier to justify. Amanda monitored Scout's responses with clinical detachment, adjusting quantities based on his weight and tolerance. When he seemed to bounce back between exposures, she increased the amounts, telling herself that his resilience proved he wasn't ready to die yet. The most disturbing part was how normal it felt. Mixing poison into Scout's food while he wagged his tail in anticipation became just another chore, like filling his water bowl or letting him out to the yard. Amanda's capacity for compartmentalization, honed by years of hiding her gambling addiction, allowed her to segment her actions from their consequences. But Scout's trust never wavered. Even as the poison began affecting his system, he continued greeting Amanda with enthusiasm, accepting treats from her hand without suspicion. His unconditional affection became a form of torture that Amanda pushed to the back of her mind. The final dose was different. Amanda had received an ultimatum from her creditors, $5,000 by Friday, or they'd start collecting from her family members. The euphemistic language didn't hide the threat's reality. These weren't legitimate lenders who worked through legal channels. So on that last night, Amanda calculated exactly how much antifreeze would be needed to ensure Scout wouldn't survive until morning. She mixed it into his favorite treats, held his head while he ate them, and told herself that she was ending his suffering quickly rather than prolonging his pain. Watching Elisse find Scout the next evening, seeing her sister's panic and heartbreak, had broken something fundamental in Amanda's psychological defenses. The elaborate justifications crumbled, leaving only the stark reality of what she'd done. She'd tried to murder an innocent animal who trusted her for money she'd already gambled away in her mind. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the relief when her plan began unraveling. Each lie she told to Elisse felt like another step toward the confession that was inevitable. By the time Detective Rodriguez began asking questions, Amanda was almost grateful for the chance to stop pretending that she was anything other than someone who'd betrayed the deepest trust imaginable. Now, sitting in a county jail cell awaiting trial, Amanda finally understood what her psychology textbooks had tried to teach her about addiction and moral reasoning. She'd spent months constructing elaborate justifications for actions that were simply, undeniably wrong. No amount of desperation could excuse what she'd done to Scout, and no financial pressure could justify the pain she'd caused everyone who loved him. The numbers that once comforted her now told a different story, one of choices made and trust destroyed, with consequences that no amount of calculation could ever balance. The Multnomah County Courthouse drew a crowd that spilled beyond its usual capacity. Local media had transformed Amanda Brooks's case into a symbol of moral decay and family dysfunction, while animal rights activists held vigil outside with photos of Scout and signs demanding justice for innocent victims. Inside, Courtroom 3 buzzed with the energy of a community hungry for answers to questions that couldn't be easily resolved. Judge Margaret Harrison called the court to order at 9 a.m. sharp. her stern gaze sweeping across packed gallery benches. This is a court of law, not a public forum. Any disruption will result in immediate removal. District Attorney Michael Chen opened with a presentation that reduced Amanda's complex motivations to stark criminal facts. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about greed disguised as desperation. The defendant systematically poisoned a defenseless animal over 3 weeks, researching methods to ensure his death would appear accidental, all for insurance money she planned to steal. He displayed enlarged photographs of Scout's medical records, his lab results showing dangerous toxin levels, images of the dog during his worst moments at the animal hospital. Several jurors visibly recoiled when Chen showed before and after photos demonstrating Scout's physical deterioration during the poisoning period. The defendant wants you to believe this was a moment of weakness, a desperate person making a tragic mistake. The evidence shows otherwise. This was premeditated murder, planned and executed with cold calculation. Defense attorney Janet Morrison faced an almost impossible task, humanizing Amanda without excusing her actions. Her opening statement focused on the family dysfunction and generational trauma that had shaped Amanda's choices. Amanda Brook is guilty of terrible crimes against an innocent animal. We don't dispute that. But justice requires understanding not just what happened, but why it happened. This young woman grew up in a household where gambling addiction and financial deception were normal. She learned that desperation justified any action, that family members were expected to sacrifice everything to solve each other's problems. When Elisse was called to testify, the courtroom fell silent. She wore a simple black dress and looked older than her 28 years old, the stress of recent months evident in her pale complexion and careful movements. "Tell us about your relationship with the defendant," Chen requested. "Amanda is my sister. She's always been
Sensitive, I guess. Quick to feel guilty about things that weren't her fault. After our father died, she seemed to think she was responsible for taking care of everyone." Elise's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "I thought I was protecting her by not asking too many questions when she needed money. I see now that I was enabling her instead. Did you trust the defendant with Scout?" "Completely. Amanda helped me choose him at the shelter. She knew how much he meant to me, how much he'd helped me heal from difficult times." Elisse paused, gathering herself. "I never imagined she could hurt him. Not the sister I thought I knew." Morrison's cross-examination focused on the family's enabling patterns and financial pressures. "Ms. Brook, would you say your family has a history of keeping secrets to protect each other?" "Yes. We learned early that problems were something you handled alone, not something you burdened others with." "And this pattern continued into adulthood?" "I see that now. We all suffered in silence instead of asking for help when we needed it." Dr. Sarah Chen testified as an expert witness about gambling addiction and family trauma. Her clinical assessment painted Amanda as someone whose actions, while inexcusable, followed predictable patterns of behavior learned in childhood. Children of gambling addicts often develop distorted thinking about money, consequences, and family responsibility, Dr. Chan explained. They may engage in elaborate deceptions while convincing themselves they're protecting their loved ones. "Does this excuse the defendant's actions?" Morrison asked. "Absolutely not. Understanding psychological factors that contribute to criminal behavior doesn't excuse that behavior. It can, however, inform appropriate treatment and sentencing decisions." When Amanda testified on her own behalf, the courtroom was riveted by her raw honesty about her gambling addiction and the twisted logic that had led to Scout's poisoning. "I told myself I was being merciful," she said, tears streaming down her face, "that Scout would die peacefully and Elisse would have money to help our mother. But the truth is, I was thinking about myself, about solving my problems without facing consequences." Shen's cross-examination was relentless. "You researched antifreeze poisoning for 3 weeks before you started poisoning Scout?" "Yes." You calculated precise dosages to ensure his death would appear natural? Yes. You continued poisoning him even when he showed signs of suffering? Amanda's voice broke. Yes, I did all of that. I know how terrible it sounds. Dr. Michael Hayes testified about Scout's condition, his voice professional but strained. The defendant inflicted significant suffering on this animal. The poisoning caused kidney damage that will require lifelong management. Scout trusted the person who was systematically trying to kill him. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with verdicts. Guilty on all counts. Amanda showed no surprise, only relief that the pretending was finally over. During the sentencing phase, Elisse delivered a victim impact statement that brought the courtroom to silence.
Scout survived because he's strong and because we caught it in time. But the trust Amanda destroyed can't be restored with medical treatment. She betrayed not just my dog, but the fundamental belief that family members protect each other rather than sacrifice each other for money. She paused, looking directly at Amanda for the first time during the trial. I still love my sister. I understand the pressures she was under, the family patterns that contributed to her choices. But understanding doesn't erase what she did, and love doesn't eliminate the need for consequences. Judge Harrison sentenced Amanda to 3 years in state prison with possibility of parole in 18 months, followed by 3 years probation and mandatory gambling addiction treatment. She also ordered full restitution for Scout's medical expenses and completion of 200 hours of community service at animal shelters. Ms. Brook, your actions were calculated and cruel, but I'm persuaded that they grew from genuine desperation and learned dysfunction rather than inherent evil. This sentence reflects both the seriousness of your crimes and the possibility of redemption through accountability. As Amanda was led away in handcuffs, she mouthed, "I'm sorry," to Elisse one final time. The words carried more weight now, backed by consequences and the beginning of genuine understanding about the damage she'd caused. Outside the courthouse, Elisse faced a crowd of reporters and activists, but she had only one statement. Justice was served today, but healing will take much longer. For all of us. The trial had ended, but the real work of rebuilding trust and breaking generational patterns was just beginning. 6 months after the trial, Elisse found herself in an unexpected place, genuinely happy. The realization hit her while watching Scout chase a tennis ball in the dog park on a crisp October morning. His movements fluid and enthusiastic despite the permanent kidney monitoring that would mark the rest of his life. He'd not only survived Amanda's betrayal, he'd somehow emerged more trusting, more joyful, as if surviving the worst had freed him to embrace the best. He's teaching us something, Ryan observed, settling beside her on the park bench they'd claimed as their regular spot. About resilience, about not letting someone else's choices define your capacity for happiness. Their relationship had deepened through the crisis in ways Elisse hadn't expected. Ryan's experience with his brother's addiction had prepared him to love someone working through family trauma without trying to fix or minimize the pain. He understood that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be harder than others, and that growth required both support and space. I got a letter from Amanda yesterday. Elisse pulled the envelope from her jacket pocket. It was the 4th letter Amanda had sent from the minimum security facility where she was serving her sentence. The first 3 had gone unopened. Elisse hadn't been ready to hear her sister's words. This one she'd finally read that morning. Elisse, I know you don't owe me forgiveness, and I'm not writing to ask for it. I'm writing because Dr. Martinez says part of recovery is taking full responsibility for the harm I caused without expecting anything in return. I've been in gambling addiction treatment for 4 months now, not because the court ordered it,
but because I finally understand that my problem isn't just about money or family pressure. It's about the way I learned to think about myself and other people. Dad taught me that desperate people take desperate measures and that family members exist to solve each other's problems. I took that lesson and used it to justify trying to kill Scout. The hardest part isn't prison. It's living with the knowledge that I betrayed the most innocent member of our family for money I would have just gambled away anyway. Scout trusted me completely, and I used that trust to hurt him. There's no excuse for that. No amount of debt or family trauma or addiction makes what I did okay. I'm different now. Not cured. Dr. Martinez says addiction recovery is lifelong work. But I understand things about myself that I didn't before. I know that my feelings of worthlessness came from watching Dad choose gambling over us and Mom choose peace over truth. I know that my need to be the good daughter who solved problems actually made me the daughter who created them. I don't expect you to write back. I don't expect anything. I just need you to know that I see the damage I caused, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure I never cause it again. I love you and Scout. That love doesn't excuse what I did, but it's real anyway. Ryan read the letter without comment, then handed it back. How do you feel about it? Sad? Relieved? Angry? Elise folded the letter carefully. It's the first time she's taken full responsibility without making excuses or asking for something in return. That matters. Are you going to write back?
Eventually. Not yet. She watched Scout bound toward them, tennis ball clutched triumphantly in his mouth. I'm still figuring out what a relationship with Amanda could look like, if it could look like anything. Their mother had been grappling with similar questions. Patricia's cancer treatments had gone better than expected. The tumors were shrinking, and her prognosis had improved significantly. But the family crisis had forced her to confront her own role in enabling dysfunction. I made peace by keeping secrets, Patricia had admitted during one of their weekly family therapy sessions with Dr. Chen. I taught you girls that love meant protecting each other from difficult truths. But secrets don't protect people, they isolate them. Patricia now visited Amanda monthly, conversations they both described as difficult but necessary. She'd also started attending a support group for families affected by gambling addiction, learning that their experience wasn't unique and that healing was possible even after devastating betrayals. The community response had evolved too. Initial sensational coverage had given way to more thoughtful discussions about addiction, family trauma, and the importance of mental health resources. Alpine Valley Animal Hospital had started a program offering free counseling services for families dealing with pet-related trauma, funded partially by donations that poured in after Scout's story became public. Dr. Hayes had become something of a reluctant expert on family-perpetrated animal abuse, speaking at conferences about the intersection of domestic violence, financial stress, and pet safety. Animals are often the canaries in the coal mine of family dysfunction, he told audiences. When we see systematic cruelty toward pets, we need to look at what else might be happening in that household. Elisse had been promoted to senior veterinary technician, her steady competence during Scout's crisis demonstrating leadership qualities her supervisors had previously overlooked. The raise meant she could finally afford her mother's medical expenses without working double shifts, creating space for the therapy and self-care she'd neglected for years. I'm learning that I don't have to rescue everyone. Scout needed rescuing when I found him at the shelter, but Amanda needed boundaries and consequences, not enabling. I confused love with martyrdom. As autumn deepened into winter, Scout's recovery became complete in all the ways that mattered. His kidney function had stabilized, his energy was boundless, and his trust in humans remained unshaken. If anything, he seemed more affectionate than before, as if nearly losing his life had taught him to treasure every moment of connection. Dogs live in the present, Dr. Hayes observed during one of Scout's routine checkups. Scout doesn't carry grudges or replay trauma. He just accepts that some humans make bad choices and moves forward with the ones who make good choices. The observation resonated with Elisse as she considered her own path forward. She couldn't pretend Amanda's betrayal hadn't happened, couldn't return to the naive trust they'd shared before,
but she also couldn't let Amanda's choices define the rest of her relationships or her capacity for joy. On a cold December evening, almost a year after Amanda's arrest, Elisse finally wrote back. Amanda, your letter meant a lot to me. Not because it changed anything, but because it showed me that you're finally seen clearly. I'm not ready for visits or phone calls, but I'm not ruling them out forever. Right now, I'm focused on building a life that doesn't revolve around managing other people's problems. Scout and I are both learning what it means to trust carefully rather than automatically. I hope your treatment continues to help. I hope you find ways to contribute something positive to the world when you get out. And I hope you understand that my love for you and my need for boundaries aren't contradictory. We're all learning that healing doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means going forward with wisdom we didn't have before. Take care of yourself. Elisse. As she sealed the envelope, Scout patted over and rested his head on her lap, his warm weight a reminder that love could survive betrayal, that trust could be rebuilt on stronger foundations, and that sometimes the most profound healing happened not in the forgetting, but in the careful, deliberate choice to hope again. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the world in temporary beauty that would melt and return and melt again, like forgiveness, like family, like the ongoing work of choosing love despite knowing how much it could cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.